The opening question goes to Ms. Mount first, and it is, what are your qualifications for the office of State Representative, and how do those qualifications relate to the most important issues facing Monroe?
Good evening to everyone here tonight and everyone watching on television. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate tonight because it is a great forum to discuss the issues and to learn about our records. For those of you who don't know me from school or sports or church, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was raised in Ansonia, Connecticut, and the year I was born, my father was elected to the House where he became Majority Leader and then later Attorney General. I grew up knowing firsthand what an honor it is to represent your community, but not only the honor, feeling that it's a duty to give back to the public. I'm running for state representative because it's time Monroe and Newtown had an effective voice in Hartford. It's time we get the attention we deserve. 11 years ago, my husband and I moved to Monroe with our 2 children, Dylan and Jessica. They attend Fawn Hollow and Massac. And I am an attorney, a law professor, and most recently I was the Director of Legislative Affairs for Bridgeport. I worked up in Hartford. I was very good at what I did. I worked with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, which is a bipartisan group of mayors and first selectmen, to reform property taxes by bringing state aid to education and successfully lowering costs for municipalities. I've also made relationships from the very first day I was there, relationship with the majority of senators and representatives, which will give me a seat at the table at the very first day, something my opponent has never had. In 6 years, my opponent, not ever, not once, had got a bill she introduced out of committee or passed on the floor. I will be able to be effective to do that because of the relationships I've built. I help residential property taxpayers by getting owed commercial property taxes of $7 million a year. My opponent has supported taking away revenue from Monroe and Newtown. I've been actively involved in development at the state and local level. Now more than ever, we need an effective representative for Monroe and Newtown.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Hovey.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and all of you who are here this evening and at home. In 2002, when I was elected as your state representative, I promised you that I would use my skills as an advocate and mediator, someone who can work with both sides of the aisle for what was in the best interest of Monroe and Newtown. And I have. I worked closely with the first selectmen and superintendents from both communities, and have constantly been open and available to you, my constituents. I have brought over $7 million to our towns, more than any previous representative in 112's history. I told you I would work to reform the education cost-sharing formula, and I have. 2 years ago, when the Democrat majority once again wanted to manipulate the process to the advantage of the cities, I was one of the only leaders in the room who made sure there was no harm done to our small towns. Instead of a loss, I made sure each small community got a minimum of 2% increase. I promised you I would work to cut spending and prevent increases, and I have. I worked consistently against legislation with unfunded mandates and voted against budget that had hidden taxes. Our state legislature is bullied by lobbyists or liaisons like my opponent who work for the big cities. And because of that, all of the formulas benefit the cities and are unfair to our small towns. I've obtained grant money for open space, pool restoration, Monroe's library, our schools, and public safety. I just recently was instrumental in advocating with the state for the $700,000 funding for the improvements of housing for our seniors and disabled. You see me in our community all the time. I don't just show up and pretend to be a volunteer when it's election time.
Thank you. Further comment?
Yes, absolutely. Number one, my opponent stood here in 2004 and said she'd never vote for an unfunded mandate. She advocated for in-school suspension, which is going to cost our town $100,000. Number two, big cities don't dominate the legislature. Look at Connecticut. There's 169 towns and we are mostly rural communities. That is why our big cities are doing so poorly. The $7 million my opponent speaks of, it comes from the ECS formula, which is purely formulaic. The only thing that gets out of the legislature and gets passed is what the majority decides.
Thank you. It's time. Further comment?
Yes, thank you. With all due respect to my opponent, she is completely inaccurate. The fact of the matter is that I have brought in more money. It has to do with pool, library, town greens, the police department, all various projects in this town that you've all observed. The other thing is that in the cities, we are overwhelmed by the representation of the cities. They have 4 to 5 representatives to our 1. And so there is that bias. While I've been working for you, my opponent has been working for Bridgeport.
Sorry. All right, that's time.